Hi friends, how are you? So, we are going to talk today about what do you do when the color that you get from the store doesn't match the sample or the chip. Like you've invested in that whole process of testing, you feel like you've done all your homework, the painter is done, you look at the result and your heart kind of sinks because you know what you're in for. And you probably are in for a little bit of a struggle. So let me tell you how you can take control and feel empowered in that situation instead of feeling like you are at the mercy of the painter, the paint store, the brand rep, the whole thing. Because if you think that the color looks wrong, odds are it could be, right? But here's what happens is we start down this kind of like this vortex of subjective opinions when this happens, right? You're looking at your wall and your trim and they're supposed to be the same color, but they're obviously different. What happened? The painter's standing there looking at it saying, it looks fine to me. Well, there could be a couple things there with the painter. One, color acuity. And let's talk about color acuity in depth. I just got refractive lens exchange. So I don't, my lenses and my color acuity is better than a 20-year-old's because I got rid of the old lenses, which just everybody's lenses in your eyes naturally discolor over time. It's called cataracts when it gets really bad, and it's cataract surgery when they replace your lenses, right? It gets cloudy, and when it gets really bad, it gets cloudy and it actually impairs your vision. But in the early stages, before you really even notice it, your lenses start to yellow. So really anybody over the age of 30, 35, 40, you have to wonder about color acuity. You know, is that playing a part in it? Because to begin with, when everyone has clear and crisp little lenses in their young little eyeballs, color acuity isn't equal across the board then either. So this difference in color acuity between people just gets amplified over time. So that could be the issue between you and the painter. It's a color acuity issue. And who's to say how great his is, and also his or hers. And also they've been literally up to their eyeballs in the paint because they've been applying it for days. They've been staring at it, right? So when it's just done and you have this feeling that it's not right, they're probably going to tell you, well, wait a second, it's not even cured yet. You need to let the color come to full resolution, which isn't wrong. That's true too. You kind of have to wait a minute. But, you know, after about a week, really, 14 days is about ideal for the true resolution to come through. It still looks wrong. So what do you do? And this is the other part of the problem. It's like you do kind of sometimes have to wait, right? It could settle down. You might not want to panic right away. But at the same time, there is a way to address it immediately and know what you're working with and know if it's wrong or not. We can measure the colors. We can measure the color on the wall as it was installed. You can paint a sample out of the can that was used and we can measure that sample. We can measure the trim. We can measure it right there and then. You don't have to wait 2 or 3 days or 2 weeks for the color to resolve itself because, again, there is some truth to that, but we can also just measure it and find out where we are. So what's the difference between if you let it, don't you have to let it kind of cure out before you measure it? Not really. The difference between the measurement and the perception is a different story. As long as it's dry, 24 hours later, you can measure it. But your perception of that color as it cures over the course of 2 or 3 weeks isn't just about the film curing. It's also about your vision system acclimating to the new color, right? So if we take the human beings out of this equation and measure the color, we can figure out where we are. We can determine if we even have a problem to begin with. So your painter's color acuity is an issue. And then the other thing is it could be they have a different tolerance as far as what qualifies as a decent match. It might not be the same as yours. Their expectation for what that color looks like, they could think, well, it's just fine. And they also probably want it to be over with so they can get out of it, right? They're done. They want to move on to the next thing. But if you know it's wrong and you push it, the next thing that's going to happen is the painter is going to have a rep from the paint brand to come out and take a look at it. And then, you're going to start from square one again with color acuity issues, because and I say it all the time, just because someone works for a paint brand, that doesn't automatically make them a color expert, not in any way, shape, or form. And that goes for the color consultants that work for the paint brands. They aren't necessarily a color expert either. It's like, what is your terminology for color expert? And let's talk about that, right? Just because someone has an interior design degree absolutely does not mean they're a color expert. And it's the same in graphics world, right? I was a graphic designer for 13 years. A lot of people assumed that just because you were a graphic designer, you were a color expert. And there are plenty of graphic designers out there who do not know how to get things to print correctly because they're not color experts, right? They're mutually exclusive. Interior design, color expert isn't the same lane automatically. So don't get that twisted. So, just because they're a rep for a brand, they probably have better sales skills than any other kind of skills. Certainly not color expertise. They know a lot about paint. They probably know a little bit about color, but they're not the judge and jury about this color match or whether it's off or not. And no one wants it to be off, right? Everyone's looking for a way to make it work, because to correct this, something's going to have to be repainted. And that means more product and more labor. And who's picking up the tab for that? And you as the homeowner, or you as the designer, it's like, hey, we did everything we were supposed to do. We thought we did everything right. We tested the samples. We got the samples. You did all the things right. You didn't paint them on the wall. You might have gotten sample eyes. Sample eyes can be an issue. We'll talk about that too. So what do you do? So now the rep is out there and they're like, well, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that far off. It's close enough. And, I don't know what happened. And then it can get escalated, right? It just keeps getting escalated. Weeks go by. You're still in disarray. You can't get this thing wrapped up because your color is wrong and no one can really pinpoint what is wrong. And the first step is to get everybody on the same page. So you can talk about what exactly it is. What precisely is it? What are you dealing with? You got to get everyone on the same page. All of these visual gymnastics is what I call it. Like, everybody's subjective opinion, as far as how off is it, or it's not that bad. And, then there's usually a significant other in the mix too. And oftentimes they'll say, it's fine, it'll be fine, because they just want to move on. Everyone just wants to move on. But there is an easy, very quick solution to this, and that is to just measure the color. And that was never really possible if the wall color was wrong, because there's no way you can just take a piece of the wall to the store and have them measure it. You couldn't do that before, but we can do that now because we have all of these devices. This is a color reader that was branded by Benjamin Moore. It's still a color reader. The Spectra 1 devices from Variable, these are $300. The NYX Pro, this is a NYX Pro 2, this is a NYX Mini, and of course we have the staid and standard Color Muse, right? So you have all of these handheld devices on the market now, and actually I do know with the Color Muse you can order this from Amazon. They're $70, And depending upon where you are, if you order before 10 a.m., if you're Amazon Prime, you can usually get these devices the same day. Okay, so it's $70. So if you are the homeowner trying to get to the bottom of this and you're sick of everybody telling you that you're crazy and that it's fine and that it's not a problem, if you want a final answer, spend the $70 to get a color muse delivered and then measure the color. And from this point forward, you have to start talking in terms of data. That's how we get everyone on the same page, right? This is how we get over the color acuity issue. This is how we get past the lighting issue. It's like, oh, well, it's just the light, wait, it'll change. It's just the lighting. These devices block out. They block out all ambient light. They have their own light source. So it's like a little color lab at the end of these things. So the lighting isn't an issue, right? No windows, none of that's an issue. We take that off the table. So we are whacking color acuity issues off the table. We're whacking the lighting issues off the table. That's not part of the problem. We're getting down to the nitty gritty of the DNA of the color. And if what the paint store sold you was correct, was the color that you purchased, we need to get down to that DNA. So you get that far. And lots of people who have found my YouTube videos about Color Muse are looking for this kind of support for this very reason, right? They have a problem with the color and no one is, no one is validating that it is an issue because no one wants it to be an issue. The painter doesn't want it to be an issue. The brand absolutely doesn't want it to be an issue. But here you are, very disappointed because you did all this work. You worked with the designer, you worked with a color consultant, you guys did all this work, and that color isn't the color that you've been looking at and talking about. It's just not the color. And we got to get everybody on the same page. And the only way we can do that is with the data. So, and I'm more aware of these circumstances and these situations than probably most people. This is more common than you think. It's way more common than you think. And I think the reason why many people assume that it's an infrequent thing is because they just don't know about it. Well, I know about it because the homeowners and the designers who are in this situation and aren't getting any support or answers from anybody, and clearly everyone just wants to sweep it under the rug and move on, and you'll be fine. You'll get used to it. Just, add some drapes, right? Get a rug, right? Everyone just wants to move on except for you, the designer and or the homeowner. So you get online, they get online, right? And they start Googling, and inevitably they find me at the Land of Color. They find my videos on YouTube. They might find a post on House where I'm talking about color measurements and color data values. And intuitively, they know that the answer to this conundrum is somewhere in the science, and they're right? And so then they reach out to me. So, I see these instances, and it's not any one brand, right? No one brand is any better than the other. Mistakes happen. Mistakes happen at paint stores. Things happen with bases. And really, it doesn't matter what happened, on our end, like on your end. I don't really care why the color in the can doesn't match my sample and my chip. I don't care what the reason is. You need to figure that out and you need to get it fixed. But let me tell you how this color is off from what it was supposed to be. And that's what we do with the devices. And so those are the videos that homeowners and designers find when they get to my channel or they find me on House or wherever. So you order your Color Muse, and then you measure the walls, measure the trim, measure the cabinets, and most people use the default color matching part of the apps. And that's not what we want to use. That is not where you want to be. And I am firing up my iPad over here, right? A lot of people, this is the color match, right? A lot of people are in this color match in the app. This is the Color Muse app. And all of the apps are the same. We're going to talk about that right now for a minute. So you get the Color Muse, you're going to the color match default feature in the Color Muse app, or the Spectro app, or the NYX app, or the Color Reader app, right? Talk about the Benjamin Moore branding too. So you get the device and you're using that default color match feature. And what that does is when you scan a color, the app searches its database, aligning the DNA that was captured from the device, the color DNA that the device captured, the energy from the color that the device captured. And the app tries to align that data with its database, with a color in its database. So it's just trying to find you the closest match in the database of stock paint colors from all the brands that they have to what you just measured. You know, that is the least powerful thing that these devices do. And I never use that feature. That's not where the power is in a NYX or a Color Muse or a Color Reader. That's not where all the muscle is. The muscle is in the data values. And again, they all work the same. The reason why all of these devices do the same thing and capture color energy the same way and display the same data values, right? They display results the same way in their apps, even though the apps are all different. They're all the same because there's only one color system in the entire world, globally, across every material manufacturer that you can name. There's only one color system, one color space, and it's the C-Lab color space. So all of these devices are capturing the energy of color, and the little computers inside of them transform that energy information into data values that we can use to match and measure the difference between colors, and the data values define and describe the color appearance for us, right? All that happens inside these little devices with the one color space. And the reason why all of these devices use the same color system and color space is because that is the only color system that is used to make and manufacture color. Everyone is on the same page. Paint manufacturers, textile manufacturers, dye stuff, pigments, colorants, whatever you want to say, it's the C-Lab color space, okay? And we can leverage that. And that's what I teach in my Camp Chroma course, is how to leverage that universal global color system that's been road tested since 1931, making and managing color, how to leverage that system in your color design workflow, or as a homeowner trying to get your color straight without spending a gajillion dollars on samples that you don't need. When you know how to shop for color, you only buy the samples that are truly viable. There's no buying the bundle of whites from Sample Eyes and hoping one of those 6 whites in that bundle is the one that's going to work, right? That isn't the smart way to go about it. That's not the smart way to go about it. So that's why all of these devices, so it doesn't matter what you have, they're all going to give you the data values that we need to show the painter, to draw a picture for the rep of why the color that you got isn't the color that isn't the original color. It's just not that color. And we can explain why. So let me tell you where everyone makes a mistake when they do get that far and they do get a color muse. And I talk about color muse all the time in variable. I get a little bit of a price break because we include a color muse in every Camp Chroma course kit that we ship to your house when you sign up for my course. I get a little bit of a price break, but it's nothing, it's not that great. They should be doing more for me. How's that? Let me put it that way. And I also, in my color design workflow, I use the Spectro 1 Pro. This is what I take with me everywhere. And the only reason I like the variable products is because I like the app. I like the app the best. I don't care for the app that goes, the data color app. It's not the greatest. I just dropped one. The NYX app, I don't really love that one either. It's just because I like the variable app. So that's why I talk about color muse, and that's why so many people end up with a color muse. So let me show you where we go wrong, because you guys get that far, you get to the color muse. So I'm going to click the button to turn it on, and I'm going to connect the device to my app, and it's trying to tell me what the available subscriptions are, and I don't care. So we want to go down here to the compare feature. Okay, and so this is the Color Muse app that pops up. The first thing you got to do is you got to go to settings. You got to go to settings and make it D65 2-degree observer. And settings is up here in the hamburger, okay? And this is the page, and we select settings right here. And this is the page of all the settings. So you want to capture the C-Lab values. And so in that first window, there were no values. It was just, yeah, this is a great match, or no, it's not. That's because you have to select show scan details down here. This little box has to be white in order to get the color data values. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is you have to make sure you have it set to Illuminate D65 and a 2-degree observer. So you need your values, D65 2-degree observer. I believe it's the NYX app that doesn't allow you to choose the Illuminate. It defaults to D50. I think it's the NYX Mini. And if you want to be able to choose your Illuminate, you have to buy the Pro, which is more expensive. D65 Illuminate is the standard Illuminate that is used in architectural coatings. It's usually used it's usually standard for all architectural materials, D65. D50 is for graphics and printing and ink. It's a different Illuminate for graphics and printing and ink. That's a problem, in my opinion, for NYX. But but NYX also serves the graphics and print community, as all of these devices can, because, they use the same color space too, because there's only one color system. One color system, right? The C-Lab color space. Make note of the fact that the Munsell color system was the template for this color space. So, color order system, Munsell, color space, the C-Lab color space. Those are the only two relevant color spaces, color sciencey things that are relevant to paint and materials for the built environment. RGB values don't tell you anything. RGB values are for computers. They're instructions for a monitor, a device. They have nothing to do with paint colors. C-Lab, color space, and Munsell color system. And that is why all of these devices use the same data values and display the same data values. So to get your values to show up, you have to check this box in the Color Muse app. And then I'm going to close this, and then when we go back to the window, do you see this? Now we have the LAB values. And if we swish, we have the LCH values. That is where all the power is. Now you're in control. Now you're in the driver's seat for determining if the color is right or wrong, and we can distill it down to exactly how that color is off. Is it too yellow? It's going to show up in the data values. Is it too green? It's going to show up in the data values, right? We're going to be able to see. Ideally, with measurements, if you were a painter, or I gotta write down and get this. If you're a painter or a designer or a color consultant, you should get a Spectra 1 Pro. Okay, it's $300, but it measures through gloss. So I have a sample here that we're going to use, and it has a little bit of a sheen on it. Well, your Spectra 1 Pro measures color and discounts the factor of gloss. So it gets right to the color. So that's the only device that does that, the Spectra 1 Pro. All of these other devices, the sheen, if there's any gloss level to it, the numbers could be skewed, but not by much. And with the NYX only measuring at D50 and not D65, your numbers are going to be skewed, but not by much, right? So is it a big deal? Kind of, not really. For this purpose of demonstrating if the colors are off or not, if it is enough for you to notice, if you can see it, then the difference is probably great enough to, negate that small difference in illuminant. If the difference is enough for you to see it with your naked eye, that difference is probably enough to negate any difference in illuminant, because it's like it's off, and it's going to be off under either light source because it's that off, right? So if you have a NYX, still give it a go. But if you're purchasing a device because you have a problem, get a Color Muse. And if you can afford it, if you can afford the $300, get a Spectra 1 Pro, because this is a colorimeter. The other little ones, all the other ones that I showed you, these are all, I said that wrong. This is a spectrophotometer, which is why it's called a Spectra 1. Spectrophotometer captures more of the color's energy, and it gives us more data values. It gives us more information about that color. So that's a spectrophotometer. These little ones are just colorimeters, and they don't capture as much of the color's energy, and we can't get as many data values and as much detail about a color with a colorimeter as we do a spectrophotometer. Behind a paint counter is a spectrophotometer. This is a handheld portable spectrophotometer, right? And that's the difference. Back in the day, there was no way to cut off a piece of the wall and take it to the store and measure it to see where you were with the data values. Now you can do it on site in a matter of seconds. So that's how you set up the Color Muse app, the colorimeter, which is a Color Muse. So that's how you set up the app. And this is how you get to your data values. Okay. Now, let's talk about calibration. So you're set up and you're ready to go. The Muse is prompting me to calibrate my device. And I do that with the Muse by putting the lid on it. It has a white point at the end. So we put the lid on, and then I just tap calibrate device. And it's going to calibrate it for me. Okay. And then it's going to ask me a bunch of times to calibrate. And then it's doing it. And then it takes just a couple, just a few seconds. And now we're ready to go to compare. And you see what I mean? How it's defaulting to the color match feature. It's like scan color. It's like, don't scan color now. No, this is not the time to scan color. You need to go to compare color. And now you can scan your color. And you have two windows in the Color Muse app, scan 1 and scan 2. This is the other reason why I like the variable apps, right? The Spectra 1 app is a different app because it's a different device. It's a spectrophotometer, but the user interface is the same. Okay, so you scan 1 and scan 2. This is the other thing I like, because now you can take 2 scans of the wall really easily. And when you do that, you take your 2 scans, then you're going to want to take a screenshot of that data, of these lab values, because that's what you want to analyze. Okay, so now we're scanning the wall. We got 2 scans in 2 different areas. We're going to take a screenshot when we do that, because this is now quantifying the difference between those areas that we just scanned, but that's not what we want to know. This is the delta E over here in this column. This tells you the difference. Starting from the top, it tells you, it quantifies the difference in your 2 scans in terms of lightness. A is redness, greenness, and B is yellowness and blueness. We're over here, right? So the delta E column quantifies the difference in terms of lightness, redness, greenness, yellowness, and blueness between your 2 scan areas. But that's not what we need to know. We just scanned the wall. It's the same color. We just scanned the same wall, right? So there's going to be a difference from point A to point B and any other point on the wall where you measure it. It's not all going to be the same because the wall texture isn't the same. No matter how hard someone tries or how great the paint film is not going to be perfectly equal all across the wall. Expect small differences in those measurements from point to point on the wall, but they're not going to be huge. And what we do with those multiple scans is we take a multi-point average. Okay, so you're preparing your data. You are getting all of your talking points organized to present to your rep, the paint rep, to demonstrate to them with data why and how the color that you got is not the right color. So you've taken your scans, you've taken a screenshot, and you want to take those data values and put them into a spreadsheet. And I actually like to do a handful of scans, not just 2. So I'll take 2 scans, take a screenshot. I'll take a couple more, take a screenshot. So now I have all of those data values that I measured using the Color Muse from the wall. That's the wrong color. I'm going to take all those data values and I put them into a spreadsheet. And it looks just like this. And I have it marked D65 2-degree observer. It's the walls. Because when this gets to the right people at the paint brand, you are going to have to let them know that you use the correct illuminant and the correct observer. They need to know that. Because if you don't define, this defines the light source that was used to measure the color and describe the color. To describe, these are the descriptions. This is the description and definition of the color in terms of lightness, redness, greenness, and blueness and yellowness. And if you don't have a light source defined, then none of this makes any sense. It doesn't matter. You have to define the light source in order to define and describe a color. So make sure you include that so they know that, you know what you're doing. You had the right illuminant and you had your observer. And then you take those screenshots, the data from those screenshots, and you put them in a spreadsheet, just like this. This is an Excel spreadsheet. And then I let Excel do the averaging for me. Super simple, right? So now I have an average of those, how many did I do here? 2, 4, 6 scans. I did it 3 times. I took 6 different areas on the walls. Maybe not even the same wall. You can go wall to wall, right? The whole room is painted in this color that's off. So take it from several different areas around the room and do your multi-point averaging. And now this is the data set of notations that we're going to use to compare to what the color was supposed to be, right? This is Chantilly lace. We're going to compare to the chip, which is the target, or the fan deck, which was the target. When they mix the color in the store, you know how they always put a dot on like a chip? Hopefully they're not doing it on your fan deck, right? But they always put a dot somewhere so you can see the color. Or they do a drawdown. You know, what's that drawdown being compared to? Well, the drawdown is being compared to a chip, right? The chip is the target. The chip is always the target for color matching. And that's the other thing that is incorrect. You know, people say that this isn't paint, that this is just ink on paper. It's not ink on paper. It's a special kind of lacquer. And these color chips and even the Fandex have the most stringent standards of just about anything in the entire color world industry, corner to corner. The color chip people have ridiculous standards that they have to meet for accuracy, for Fandex and chips. They have to match. They have to be on point under like 5 to 7 different light sources. I think the requirement is 5 light sources, and for extra credit and bonuses, many of the manufacturers of the color collateral go for 7 illuminants. So it's like our product, the collateral that we're making for you, is spot on under 7 different illuminants, right? So they have some of the most stringent standards for paint chips and Fandex ever, which is why a lot of people use the Fandex as the target for a mixed color match. How do you know if the color is mixed right? What do they do? How do you test it? How do you know? You have to get some of it out of the can and dry it on something that you can either eyeball or measure, right? And what are you measuring that against? A chip. So now you have your sample that you painted or your sample eyes that you use to make your color decision. So it's time to measure this. And I go to Easy RGB often to pull those data values, because Easy RGB measured brand new Fandex, and I've mentioned this before, and I know where the Fandex came from because I sent them several. I sent them to Beijing many years ago. They were brand new Fandex that I acquired myself, still in shrink wrap, put them in a box, and I sent them to Easy RGB, and they measured them. So that's where some of the American collections in Easy RGB came from. And at the time I was talking to them, I know their instrumentation, I know their color lab, they know the whole standards thing. They have their stuff together. So it's a trusted resource, Easy RGB. So I will go to Easy RGB and pull the C-Lab values. Because, and this is Chantilly lace. And this is kind of a little bit of a side note. There are going to be 2 Chantilly laces in Easy RGB. And that's because they measured chip 212170, and they also measured chip OC65, because Chantilly lace shows up 2 times in the Benjamin Moore collection. It's a duplicate, or some people call it an alias. I think Benjamin Moore calls it an alias when they have one paint color that has 2 different color numbers. Yeah, it's called an alias. So because it appeared twice in a Fandex, Easy RGB measured it 2 times and notated it with each of those numbers, OC65 and 212170. So in this situation, that's super handy, because I'll go pull both of those chip measurements from Easy RGB because they measured it 2 times. So I'll do the same thing. I'll pull their LAB numbers and I'll average Easy RGB's LAB numbers. So now I have a baseline for what Chantilly lace should have looked like as defined and described in LAB values. And now I've measured whatever I have that was supposed to be Chantilly lace but doesn't look like Chantilly lace. Now I have those numbers. This is a piece of trim. Could be a piece of trim, it could be the wall. So now I have my wall, my color defined and described in LAB numbers. So now we can compare, right? This is what my wall was supposed to look like in Chantilly lace notation, but this is what I got. And I can see how and why it's off. And in this particular analysis, we can see that the B values are significantly off. The walls that were supposed to be Chantilly lace are short in yellowness compared to what it was supposed to be. And that's why it doesn't look right. That's why this wall that was painted in a bench memoir product, it wasn't a color match, it was a bench memoir product. This is why the walls don't look like the chip or the samples. It's short in yellowness, and it's not short in yellowness by just a little, right? The difference is a lot. You don't have to be a mathematician, right? You don't have to know, how all of this color math happens. You just need to copy those data values from the app, put them into an Excel spreadsheet, and then let it do the averaging for you, right? You don't have to do any math. Can you copy and paste? Can you take a screenshot, right? And then it's just simple subtraction from this point to be able to see the difference and how the difference between the wrong color on the wall to what Chantilly lace should be is just simple subtraction. And then, right, and this isn't your problem, designer, homeowner, this isn't your problem. But the paint brand, the paint store, should be interested in knowing this little nugget of information, that the color that they sent out the door was off in yellowness. So these data values should help the store, the formulator peoples who work for the paint brands, to figure out what could have gone wrong on their end. Why is Chantilly lace leaving in a can of base this short in yellowness? And then they can go analyze the formula. They can go analyze the base. They can go analyze whether the difference in sheen made a difference and, where they have a problem. Not your problem. Not my problem. All I can tell you, Mr. Paint Rep, is I don't care what you think it looks like. I don't care what my painter thinks it looks like. It's not okay. There's also a difference here in redness and greenness, which is A, right? A is redness and greenness. So we're off a little bit here too, but it's not a whole lot. This isn't going to be noticeably different. This is not going to be a noticeable difference to someone with average color acuity in the average installation in the three-dimensional built environment. This difference between 1.06 and 1.59 isn't going to be noticeable. The difference between 0.16 and 2.37, yeah, this isn't a little problem. This is a big problem. This kind of a problem in difference in the dimension of blueness and yellowness, that justifies replacement product and somebody cutting a check for the labor to repaint. It does. And the entire story, right? The entire story, the whole scenario, this whole situation can be summed up in an Excel spreadsheet with just a handful of data values. These pulled directly from EasyRGB because it is a trusted resource for LAB values. Yeah, paint brands actually rely on the EasyRGB database as well. So EasyRGB isn't going to be a foreign entity to them. And, if they want to pull their, what is it when it's their own thing? Their proprietary LAB values for Chantilly lace, you should encourage them to do that. They're not going to be a whole lot different than what EasyRGB has. They're not. They're not going to get a different result by pulling their proprietary LAB values and comparing them to what you got with a Color Muse set to D65 2-degree observer. It's not going to make that much of a difference. The story is going to be the same, and the end of that story is going to be the same. It's, what was sent out the door of the store was not right, and the product and the labor needs to be replaced. What a pain in the butt. What a pain in the butt. But you as the consumer, or you as the designer, is now speaking from a point of power. It's hard to argue with data. Now, they might argue with a color muse, a colorimeter. I keep dropping them. They might argue with, well, that's just a colorimeter. That's a $70 device. And we're talking thousands of dollars. Okay, well, we can bump one up and spend $300 and do a handheld spectrophotometer. If you know all the right people, me, and you're in Phoenix, if you got that problem in Phoenix, we will pack up our X-Rite spectrophotometer, color lab worthy grade, same thing that they have in the color labs. We'll bring this out and I'll measure it and we'll get it with, the big guns. We can do that. So there's many ways around the colorimeter conversation if they don't want to accept that data because it's just a colorimeter. You're not going to get the results aren't going to be that different, especially when we are looking at a problem that is visibly noticeable to someone with reasonably good color acuity. And those are the issues, right? When it's that dramatically different, those are the kinds of issues that do warrant product replacement and someone cutting a check for the labor to repaint. And really, the labor to repaint, I dropped that cap and I'm going to pick it up. The labor to repaint isn't going to be that terrible. I can bend down and get it. Hold on. Because, most of the cost is in the prep and everything. It's like one coat of the right color over the wrong color is probably going to be enough to get these numbers better aligned. You might have to do 2 if you're talking about Chantilly lace or simply white or one of those colors of white that notoriously has poor hide. You might have to do 2 coats because they are sheer colors with terrible hide. But, the labor for that isn't going to be as much as it was for the labor to begin with. So one of the more popular, and I recommend this too. I tell people all the time to just, instead of trying to choose trim color and choose a white wall color, just use the same color in different sheens. I've gotten conflicting information. I have a friend on the house forum who has mixed paint for a particular company for 35 years. And he was insistent once when we had this conversation that the formula is not different from sheen to sheen. And I was a little confused because I don't ever pay attention to the formulas, right? The formulas are it's focusing on a paint color formula is a complete waste of time. It doesn't matter if there's a shot of yellow oxide or burnt red umber, or the formula tells you nothing. A paint formula is just a list of ingredients. It's just a recipe for a color. There is nothing about that defines or describes color appearance. It's just the ingredients. And there's only like 10 or 12 ingredients in the entire, system that they use to make 3,500 colors. And that has always kind of perplexed me. It's like, well, what percentage of those 3,500 colors have a shot of yellow oxide in it, yet someone chooses to hyper-focus on the yellow in the formula and then somehow translates that to it having a yellow undertone? It's like, well, how many colors in the entire collection have a shot of yellow oxide when there's only... I don't get it. I don't get that. I don't get the whole formula thing. And maybe it's because I know you can just go to the data values. LAB tells you redness, greenness, yellowness, and blueness. LCH, which is a different format of the C-Lab color space. So you have the C-Lab color space. You can describe a color's location, the coordinates, of a color's location in that color space two ways. You can use the LAB values that we just talked about, or you can use the LCH values, which I actually have in the paint color DNA table. I have all of the LCH numbers. Like, this is for something else I was working on earlier, but this is the paint color DNA table, and when you get in there, this is lilac hush, this is lightness, chroma, hue angle, and then the Munsell hue family, value, chroma, and LRV. This is what I have in the paint color DNA table. And the LCH notation is just a different format in the C-Lab color space, which is a three-dimensional color space. And it's the coordinates for where that color is. And so you have a choice. We can take a look at the coordinates for that color in color space in terms of lightness, redness, greenness, and blueness and yellowness. Or we can do, those are called the Cartesian coordinates, if you're interested. Or we can do polar coordinates. And the polar coordinates takes those C-Lab color space notations and they put them in a format that is similar to an easier format to think about color, which is hue, value, and chroma. So those are the polar coordinates, LCH, and then the LCH hue angles are what are on the outside of the color strategist color wheel, and they correlate nicely, not precisely, they correlate nicely to the Munsell hue families on the inside of the color strategist color wheel. So when you find, if you're working in LCH, if you're pulling LCH from one of the apps, because the apps for all of those devices will give you LCH in the next swipe, like I showed you earlier. So if you're pulling the hue angle and you want to know what hue family of color belongs to, right, you can just go to the paint color DNA table and you look up, oh, it's upside down. I always get something upside down. If I don't get something backwards or upside down, is it really alive with Lori? And so we have the hue angle right here for lilac hush, and it belongs to, it has a hue angle of 70 degrees, belongs to the yellow red hue family. It tells you that right there in the DNA table. If you want to go look at it on the color strategist color wheel, we can see that 70 degrees is right here at the end of the yellow red hue family. So now you know where lilac hush lives in color space. So that's what we're doing with the LAB values. We're plotting Chantilly lace in color space, and we plotted the color that was wrong on the wall into color space, the same three-dimensional color space. And those data values are measuring the distance between them. And that distance between them tells us precisely how they're different. And in this case, this wrong color was short and yellow. So that's what we're doing, right? We're plotting the colors in color space, and the computers in these things do all of that for you. So there's no color math. You don't have to understand math. The numbers aren't any more complicated or involved than a thermometer or a clock, to be quite frank. You know, it's simple math if you go that way. And so you do have a choice in the C-Lab color space if you want to use LAB values or if you want to use LCH values. We're using LAB values for this little situation where the paint store gave us the wrong color, because paint, the paint brands function in LAB more than LCH because they're not looking to easily give you a color description. They're looking to make the product. So that's why the LAB format is a better fit for them. If you're a color professional, you need to be fluent in both LAB and LCH in the C-Lab color space. You need to be fluent in both, and this is why, right? LAB is ideal for mapping and detailing exactly how colors are alike or different, or most similar, or how are they different, which is what we did. And LCH, the LCH format, is really an at a glance format. So you can just quickly look at the hue angle and know what hue family it belongs to. When you know the color strategist color wheel and you see that Lilac Hush has a hue angle of 70, you know that you're over here in the yellow red hue family. So it becomes more like a reflex. It is like a bit like learning a second language, hue families and hue angles, but it becomes very intuitive and very natural. Like I said, just like being able, if you can look at a clock, an analog clock, you glance at it, it's like, oh, that's 3:00 p.m. You can look at the hue angle for a paint color of 70 degrees and immediately know, oh, that's the yellow red hue family. It works the same way. You know, that's the expertise. That's the skill that you get in Camp Chroma that I teach you. That's how I qualify color expert, is you are fluent in the color system that's used to make and manage the color in the first place. And that's how you're able to deal with situations when the color comes out wrong. You know, that's one of the ways we use it. The more fun part